Okay, we got an hour, and we are going to take the gloves off and get into some pricing, cost. Like, how much does this stuff actually cost? Where are the actual savings? Where's the risk? So I've got two friends and experts with me on the panel today, and I'm going to first let them introduce themselves. But if we go back to kind of the main room where the idea was, how do we solve these big questions that if we don't tackle, then we're never going to kind of get to the next place of a better, as Vaughn so eloquently said, scenario 3. Like, how do we actually achieve that? And I think one of the things on everybody's minds is, does IC actually save money? And what I'm not going to talk, I don't really care to talk about, does it save time? We all know that. Like, let's just not waste any time talking about that. Let's talk about the price, the cost, the scale, and where you start getting efficiencies and costs. And let's talk about risk. Risk and cost are, yes, they're interdependent, but risk is a different calculus. And it's not one that we can price very well yet. So we'll sort of hit those two topics: cost, risk. I think everybody, is anybody here that wasn't here yesterday? Hands? Oh, okay, a couple people. So let me just do a quick intro. Colby Swanson, I am the partner at ADL, and I manage the industrialized construction practice. I see a ton of new faces that I've not met before, and I'm really excited to, please come up and introduce yourself. So with that, I guess I was going to say I spent a lot of years involved in class action lawsuits and fixing broken buildings. In fact, I did it on the military base at Key West. I spent 2 months down in Key West. There were about 1,000 single-family houses that were just getting moldy, and like the warriors who live in those houses were getting sick. It was a 60-minute national TV expose. Right after that happened, my phone rang and they said, "Get down here." So I was in the building science side of things. I was investigating the physics of why buildings fail. And you do that long enough, you start seeing patterns in the industry, and it's not good. It's not what it could be. And I think what we're talking about here at industrialized construction is this future state that we need to get to. So, okay, let's get into it. That's enough about me. I'm going to first let both gentlemen sort of tell you who they are, what their company, a little bit about, what they do. So, guys, few minutes each. Andy.
Well, I got to get used to this mic first. So, Andy Miller, I am the CEO of Vantem Global. Vantem has 2 plants, volumetric plants in the Southeast. It's where we primarily play in this industry. So, I've been in the industry a long time. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it's a lot. And I've done quite a few things and held quite a few hats. I'm not sure that there's not one I haven't held at some point in my career. But most recently have been involved primarily in the multifamily sector from a vertical integration standpoint with another company that Vantem acquired. So having that experience, bringing it to the table, and can hopefully shed some light on cost and what we see from that side, especially in the Southeast, which is where we're really experienced. But look forward to sharing some of this information with everybody here today.
Justin.
Hey, everybody, old friends. Justin Stewart, CEO of Synergy Modular. So we're a 36-year, second-generation commercial GC. So being born into it, basically. But we went heavy into offsite and industrialized construction about 2015 and spent a couple of years going to every factory that would have us, every development project, architect, just really diving into why the industry, frankly, wasn't working at the time. Going through lessons learned, putting together our own thesis before we built our first project. First project, it was affordable housing. So over those 36 years, about 50% of what we've done has been affordable housing, multifamily affordable. Did that first project, generally successful, but then did a deep debrief on that project and said, if we're going to do this again, what would we do differently? And when we were done with that exercise, it didn't resemble a typical development process, let alone a typical GC process. So options were either never do this again or start a second company. So we did. So I founded Synergy Modular on the heels of that project. I actually founded it right here in Austin. And since that time, we've built projects from Texas west, heavily in California, just heavy demand over there. And so we've been fortunate enough to build industrialized construction projects all over the Western US. Also fortunate enough then to work with HUD and International Code Council on some international trips and get a lot of perspective internationally. So we're on trips over into Tokyo, Sweden, Scotland, and the UK, then just commercially over into China and Singapore and Malaysia, looking at what's possible in different regulatory environments and how we might be able to apply that back here. So given that perspective, because some of the things you'll hear today do take some international perspective into account. And then on those trips, got heavily into mass timber. And mass timber, not from the perspective that most people might get into it, where it's, you see it on university campuses and other things where it's just it's a beautiful product. But from a general contracting perspective, if it's $1 more expensive, it's not getting built. So it was learning how to leverage a material that is extremely precise and extremely manufacturable to then leverage that into a cost-efficient method. And so I've been working with some of the best in the industry on that and now bringing a manufacturable mass timber product to market as well. So.
All right, so this is great. We got a West Coast, East Coast. We got mods, panels. We got a manufacturer. We got a GC. All right, so we got a lot of things to get through. Let's start with I think the easy question. Is this coming through okay? Can you guys all hear me in the back? Okay, good. I've got terrible hearing, so sometimes I talk too quiet and I don't realize it. So I wanted to know, what is the cost baseline in the market that you guys build in? So let's just establish, what's the market rate for the things that you're building typology-wise? Can you just kind of talk through that, a little bit, Andy, on the East Coast? Like, what do you got to do to be competitive? And I'm not talking about modular. I'm just talking about what the market requires you to do in the typologies that you guys know best.
Well, in the Southeast, as probably most of you know, is probably the lowest cost market to build. It's the toughest place to compete, not only from a modular standpoint or a volumetric, but also just from a traditional building standpoint. We routinely hear, and every owner, developer that I talk to has to hit a certain price point per key for his numbers to work, for the deal to pencil, for him to be able to go forward with the deal. And the numbers we typically hear, and when I say numbers, I'm talking about construction only, vertical construction. I'm not going to get into soft cost, horizontal dirt work, land cost, because those are on top of what we're talking about here. But what we routinely hear and we routinely deal with is a number of about $145,000 per key.
Tell me about that key. What's that room?
Well, in a multifamily building, and it's averaged across the 1, 2s, and 3s, their average and the way they like that number to work up for their cap stack and for their lending and so on, and the return, the IRR, is that they have to hit a cost structure that is beneficial to them to allow them to go forward with the deal. So $145,000 per key means that a 1-bedroom, 2 or 3-bedroom unit averaged across the building is $145,000 raw vertical cost going forward.
Tell me what's the product like? Is this a high-end luxury? Is this characterize the
It's a market rate multifamily building. So it's going to be typically type 5, 3 or 4 story. Could be a garden style. Could be a 4-story with elevator. But those products are very similar, and it could be up to 5 stories. over podiums. So we see that routinely. But the per key number is the actual cost of the living unit that is part of that building. You know, these projects can be as small as 50 units. We've not really done any, and from our standpoint at Vantem, not small, but most of the ones that we've done have been from 200 to 400 in units. So large projects built across the Southeast. In the last 6 years, we've built roughly 3.2 million square feet of multifamily products. So we've got a really good benchmark of where those numbers need to be. And along that journey, we were able to not only determine what our costs were, but take advantage of, I'm not going to say standardization because it's used a lot. I'm going to say repeatability. The key in a manufacturing operation is repeatability. Doesn't mean you can't have some customization, but you want as much repeatability as you can in the product to keep those costs down.
Perfect. Okay, so 145 a key. Let's talk about that in terms of dollar per square foot. What would you put that number at? Because I think Justin's probably going to talk a little bit. Maybe you can do both.
Sure.
And it'll depend on the mix of the 1, 2s, and 3s. And typically, you don't see a lot of studios much in the larger projects. In the smaller projects, we'll see those. But most of our projects have been 1, 2s, and 3s. And they're a combination of about 60, 30, 10, based on the makeup of the buildings and the project. But in terms of square footage for vertical cost from slab up, that equates to about $165 to $170 a square foot, all in.
You guys writing this down?
You're not going to hear these numbers from me.
Nobody's going to tell you these
Now,
numbers.
this is the Southeast. I want to make sure you understand it's extremely competitive in the Southeastern
Yeah,
markets.
and again, we're going to break these numbers down and start moving into the modular side with Andy and probably a little bit of mass timber and with Justin. But anyhow, okay, so I think that's a good benchmark. So we're talking 145,000 a key in the Southeast, market rate apartments, 200, 300 square unit buildings. Gentleman's got his hand up.
But you said from the slab up, so what about utilities?
Okay, yeah.
That's all horizontal. We're not going to. I mean, that can be. That's based on the site, as you well know, if you're in from the GC side. But I didn't really want to get into that because that could really skew the numbers from one project to the next. So we're talking about slab up vertical construction, from slab to CO.
Hey, thank you. And if anybody yell out a question, like
Absolutely.
we don't have any slides, so we're just kind of winging it here. All right, Justin, your turn. Let's talk about the benchmark. Like, what do you got to build to? And the western part of the U.S. has got some like expensive places versus like the Southeast. So maybe touch on a couple different.
Sure. Yeah. So very geographically dependent. So you get in the Bay Area, it's the highest cost. LA, a little bit less. Seattle's similar to LA. Get into Arizona, it's less. So it's very geographically dependent. That said, if we're getting into a modular conversation, we're probably not buying the mods for less than about $150 to $175 a square foot.
Okay, hold on.
I'll show you all you want.
So in the Southeast, he's doing the building
Right.
square footage. You're just getting mods.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and obviously that number changes depending on where it's going and what the code level it's going into, and obviously whether the modular supplier really needs the project and has an open slot in their line. Right, those numbers can come down quite a bit, but nobody and no developer should ever plan on that. So they should be planning on real numbers. So take modular out of the equation, site built. And if you're getting into more of a cost per key, if you could ever get below 200,000 per key, you are every developer's best friend, but it's likely never going to happen. Maybe in Arizona with garden style product. Not in Washington, not in California.
What does it look like, let's say, pick a city in California, pick a city in Washington?
So getting in the greater Seattle area, a lot of this depends on how the project was designed to begin with. And we can get into that a little bit because, like I said in the opening, if you use a traditional method of development, your project's going to be expensive. And in a given Seattle market, that is going to equate to more than $300 a square foot and likely close to $300,000 a unit. In the, I am including site utility costs because that's the only way we can price a project. Nobody wants a building if it's not hooked up to utilities. So that is including foundations and everything. But greater Seattle area, that's that. In the Bay Area, if you are getting below $400 a square foot, you're every developer's best friend. Most site-built projects are coming in the $450 to $650 range, depending on how it's designed, and especially if it's affordable housing with prevailing wage.
And are we talking about the same kind of product? Like, what's the typology of the product when you say?
Most of it's podium. Most of it. Over there just lands a premium, so most of it's going to have structured parking and a podium product.
So one or two of a podium, 1-2 stories of a podium, and then 5, 6, 7 stories of apartments.
Sure. And so, I mean, for those not familiar, in the West Coast, you can actually go 5 levels of wood or 6, depending on the city you're going, on top of podiums. So that just pushes you into a type 3 construction. Type 3 means that all of your structural members and your exterior has to be non-combustible, but you can still build the building out of light timber frame. So if you're doing an 8-story building, that could be 5 over 3, it could be 6 over 2, just depending on the city you're going into. And then oftentimes we might have a couple levels underground too.
I will say too, if you're going to compare that a little bit, the number that typically the developer wants to hit in the Southeast all in is between 210 and 230,000 a key. So that'll give you a little bit of a benchmark difference when you're looking at an all-in type structure based on where that developer is trying to hit. That's soft cost, that's horizontal land, 100%.
Okay, and Justin gave a number of 170 just for the mod. What's your just mod cost, Andy, in the Southeast for this apartment?
And let me quantify this just a little bit before we get to that. But one of the things we did, I think we're the only manufacturers done this, but I'm not 100% sure. But we had what we called a universal box. That 3.2 million square feet I told you we have built was built with 5 unit styles. So we had 2 1-bedroom designs, 2 2s, and a 3. But there was only 4 universal boxes that made all of that. So in our operation, what we would do, we would gear up and we'd say, we're going to build box A, as an example, for 8 weeks. Bam. That allowed us to get really good because remember what I said about repeatability? When you're repeating the same thing over and over and over again, you get really good at it and you get really cost effective. You're able to source materials, buy in advance, import. A good example would be countertops. Domestically, quartz countertops, I would pay $32 a square foot fabricated.
Write that down, $32 a square foot.
But if I import them, if I want to fabricate them, if I want to do my own fab shop, I can import slabs for $3 a square foot. But fabricated, importing them is typically around the $14 to $16 a square foot. So roughly half, but you got to get 4 months in advance to do those type things. So, but we got really good because we knew what we were going to build and we were able to take advantage of all of those lower cost associated with buying in volume, all the supply we needed to fabricate the modular boxes. So having said that, all of that, with this, understanding all of that, what we were doing is that we were able to build modular boxes at an $85 per square foot range out the door and still make our profit margin that we wanted to make in the plant. So considerably less than probably any of my competitors. I almost hate to say those numbers, but that was our strategy. Our whole goal was to not only hit the numbers that I talked about with the 145 key, but to continue making improvements on the cost as we went through, as we were building those products. So we looked at every advantage we could get, not only at the plant, but in the field, to make our products go together better. And I will say one thing. I think there's a big misconception sometimes about modular. Building a great modular box, having a factory and building a great modular box is only about 40% of the journey. If you can't extend that through the completion in the field, and what I mean by that is I can build a great box, but if it doesn't go together well, if it wasn't designed to go together well, if it wasn't engineered to make sure that the MEP connections and all of that was easy and simple, then you've lost all the efficiency you gained in the plant, and you basically pushed it off to Justin in the field. So our whole goal was to make the entire process as seamless as possible and as good as it could be. You got a question?
Yeah, let's jump into that and speak up loud.
No problem. As an owner, though, how do we guarantee that? How do we make sure that happens? Does that start with the owner? Does that start with the architect? Does that start with the prime?
Good question.
Responsible to make sure that happens?
It starts at the very beginning. I mean,
What does that mean, Andy?
well, look, routinely, we have developers bring us a fully designed project that the architect has already got it in place and says, I want you to build this modular. Well, guess what? I can build anything, but what happens is that cash register goes cha-king, 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 cha-king. It was not designed modular. So we need to be involved. I think the way I would look at it is when an owner developer decides to do a project, he has what he calls AOC meetings. You're going to have an architect and the owner himself and his general contractor, his contractor. And those meetings start early on in this process. The manufacturer has to have a seat at that table from day one. He needs to be involved. We need to be involved with the architect of record. We need to make them understand what building effectively in a plant, how to do that. There's some really good architects out there today, I will say, that are very effective at designing using modular construction methods. But for probably every one, we've got another 100 that's not very good at it. And it's not because they don't want to be, they just don't understand. So I'm not throwing darts at that industry.
Let's throw darts, Andy. Let's throw darts.
Well,
Justin,
throw darts.
Justin,
I'll
I want to
throw
hear
darts.
from the GC perspective.
Modular construction is just a different method of construction, but it's unique. It's unique in its design. It is unique in its engineering, and it's very unique in its execution. And if all of that is not taken into consideration from the very front, even with the GC, the sequence of events in a traditional build is much different than the sequence of events in a modular construction build.
We're getting into a topic, and Justin, you brought this up earlier, which is about programming. And as an owner, if you come into this and don't have an idea, like you're just building the next project, it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to cost what it's going to cost. The factory can't help you. Nobody can really help you. But if you've got a program and you've got a product, I mean, like we heard in the so Justin, from a GC's perspective, can you kind of how do you look at answering that gentleman's question? When does it start?
So happy to get a little more granular on that. So typical development project, you're going to go maximize land value, right? So as a developer, you're going to look at a piece of dirt, you're going to look highest and best use, you're going to look at all of your limitations, setbacks, height limits, density, and you're going to maximize that land value. And that's the way that the development process is built. So from an architect to general contractor, we are all used to absolutely maximizing every square inch of that site. The right way to go about industrialized construction, and this is going to sound a little romantic, but it's actually the right way, is to think about the end use of the building itself. So if you're building student housing, if you're building affordable housing, if you're building luxury hotel, you're thinking of the end use first, and you're thinking of that actual unit, and you're optimizing the floor plan for the end use of the space while working with an offsite manufacturer to make sure it's manufacturable. So you're going from a floor plan out, and you're aggregating together optimal units and use those to create your massing. And now different manufacturers are gonna have different restrictions on what they can manufacture, and then you can get into some dimensional restrictions depending on the system you're using. And so you might not maximize every square inch of that site, you might not maximize your net rentable square feet, which is why most projects don't use this method, because they started underwriting a piece of dirt on residual land value basis. And residual land value basis is create a fictitious massing, assume 85% efficiency of net rentable, and run a pro forma and go put the piece of dirt under contract. And that's the wrong way to develop using modular. To
You
use
can't
modular.
develop,
Well
that's,
said.
yeah, it
Well
doesn't
said.
work, right? Because they try, I mean, every little room starts getting changed because you're trying to deal with the corner of the lot that starts to wedge down, and pretty soon you just don't have any repeatability. You've lost all control of the project. I want to hear the multi-year thing.
Well, I mean, there's no magic there. Some of it is location and labor rates, some of it is code. You're building in California, you're building to a lot higher code from an energy performance, from a fire performance, from a smoke control, from a, you name it. You're just building to a higher performance code there. But then also, if you're building in the West, even if your factory's in Boise, your labor rates are in the mid-20s before burden, even in that factory. So you're not building anywhere near, we all laugh at the debate about minimum wage. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Nobody anywhere near minimum wage has been around a job site in years, or in a factory. So if you're just building in the western half of the U.S., it's both labor wages and code. That being said, the bill of materials, bill of materials is not that different. The bill of materials, it's well less than $100 a square foot.
Let's break that down. Andy, you've got like a really good way of
yeah,
structuring cost inside of a factory.
Look, I will tell you, and I grew up in the industry, so I understand the way most of the manufacturers work up their pricing, but I don't do it that way. I changed when I did the current plants I'm running now with a developer. I started to change my way of thinking more like a developer would or a general contractor would. So our cost makeup is pretty simple. We got materials. Our materials are typically anywhere, depending on the product, 36 to 40 bucks a square foot, maybe 42 if it's in the high wind situation.
This is light wood frame construction.
Right, this is all wood frame. And then your labor, all in labor, direct, indirect, with burden is around $15 a square foot. If I'm looking at direct only, it's somewhere around 12. And then what we call factory overhead, let's talk about that just a minute. You got a building, you got electricity costs, you've got anything associated with maintaining that building and running product through that building. It's typically around $7 to $7.5 bucks a square foot. And you start to add those numbers up, and then you've got your fixed cost, which is typically for me about $6 a square foot if I'm running at 80% capacity. And then at the end of the day, you got your labor. So when I sit down with a client, it's simple. You can control two of those four, okay? You can control material costs based on your selection of material. We can help you keep that cost down. But if you've got to have a high-end faucet or a specific sink or granite countertop or whatever that's at a higher level than we typically see, you're going to add that to the material cost. I'm not going to charge any profit on that because remember, I've got a line that just says profit. So you can affect that one. The other one you can affect is my profit line. And here's how you do that. if you're going to buy one project from me, let's just say it's 50 boxes for one multifamily building, I'm not going to cut you a break at all. That's not much repeatability. But if you're going to give me a long runway of product, if you're going to commit to me for, let's just say, a couple million square feet of product, now we're talking. I will help you with that line. I'll reduce it because now I have predictability for my facility. I know that I've got a long runway. I can plan, and I can probably get even more efficient on my end to make up for what I'm going to give you in that lost profit side. But I can't do it otherwise. So that's how an owner, developer can influence those two numbers and get the price down.
And that's just the box, the mod. Justin, let's talk about the GC right now, all the sites. So you've got your best deal. So think about this in terms of the scale thing. Like, so now in Andy's scenario, 2 million square foot, you're the GC on that work. Where do you see efficiencies? Where are your levers that the owner can start to toggle and go, okay, well, let's talk about that and let's drive that down. Where do you see those savings?
So first, and especially for everybody, for this audience, it's one thing to say you have 2 million square feet to go build. That's good. It's a lot better to say we have 5 or 10 years of demand and build a repeatable program that is going to be built out over 5 to 10 years.
Like Walmart, like Chick-fil-A.
Exactly.
Then you can plan resources for that. You can plan systems for that. You can design and engineer up front for that. You run your procurement for that. You set up teams for that. That's where you're going to get cost efficiency and higher quality and all the benefits you want is a longer term multi-year program. Most modular projects, and when I say most, I mean 99% of them, are construction indoors. And construction, every building is a prototype. It is custom engineered from the ground up. You start with a site, you get a civil engineer, structural engineer, MEP engineers, and they are custom engineering a prototype from the ground up. And so then you're just turning to a factory and saying, go build this custom, one-off, bespoke, unique building, but you just have better jigs and you're building indoors. If you're not doing that and you have a delivery system that is multi-year, that's where you can start to get efficiency.
So give me the GC specifics, right? So Andy's breaking down his 2 levers that you as the owner get to toggle, which one of them is the materials selection that you pick for your building, because he's got to buy all that and put it in his factory and put it in your mod, or the profit margin. What are yours?
There's one other thing
Oh,
from the factory side, and then I'm going to let you take over. But logistics is a big issue when it comes to modular construction. What I mean by that is that product's built, it comes out the plant, but it's got to get delivered to the site. It's got to get staged. It's got to be spotted to the crane. So if you've got that kind of runway, you can go to that logistics company that's going to deliver that product from the plant to the site. You can say, I've got enough runway for you to keep 10 drivers, 15 drivers busy for the next 5 years. They will give you a better price, won't you, Kristen? So it's not only just the plant, but it's also the suppliers that provide not only materials but services for the plant. You're able to go out and negotiate some really aggressive numbers because you can give them a large runway.
Okay, so GC side, you're really not going to change your site work, your underground utilities, your podiums, your concrete. That's not going to change. That's a huge market. You're not going to influence it by doing years of runway, or you can influence it by volume, of course. Like if it's a bigger project, your cost per square foot goes down on that stuff. But that is just a very mature subcontractor market, and the pricing is the pricing. In the modular portion, your MEP prices end up being the largest site-built cost for a site-built GC. And mechanical, electrical, plumbing subcontractors don't know how to price modular and don't want to know how to price modular. So most often what happens, especially with GCs that might be in their first 5 modular projects, they're used to going out to the market, getting 3 to 5 competitive bids on a given project, and that's a pretty good indication of where the market costs are. You do that on a modular project, and you're going to get 3 to 5 electricians that are 200% higher than they should be. You're going to get 3 to 5 plumbers that are 200% higher than where they should be. And you're going to think that that's the cost, but it's not the cost. To the level we had to, after training a MEP subcontractor, we then acquired one so that we could, because we were already contracting at cost plus basis for these things because we knew what it should cost and they wouldn't sign up for it. So then we ended up having to acquire one. Yeah, and I'll actually add to that a little bit in that it's not just, yes, standardization of those connections so they understand it, but the trades themselves, the way buildings are built, the electrical drawings on a multifamily project are, here's your 4-gang switch, and there's a light, and here's a curved line. Show up and figure out how to get it there. Yeah. That doesn't work in a manufacturing environment, right? So the trades are used to that, though. The trades are used to showing up with drills and saws in their hands and figuring out how to get from point A to point B.
Chainsaws in some
And
cases.
the last thing you want, the last person on a job site you want with a drill or a saw in their hand is the MEP trades.
Yeah.
You just don't want them to have drills and saws in their hands in general. And with industrialized manufacturing, you shouldn't have to. Your drawings are to a level where you know exactly how everything is run. And taking that to the site-built portion, you can do the same thing all the way to knowing exactly the length of your feeder that's going from the meter room to the unit. You know that. You know those runs. You can put in a tray. You know what that is. You can have those pre-cut and pre-done. You can have the MEP routing done for the site-built portion and just pretend like you're in a factory because it's designed, but the trades are not used to that. So it's going to be a learning curve.
Okay, I see a couple hands up, and I want to come to you. I just want to make one point because Shanti Plus is here with NREL, and Shanti did a great service to the industry of thinking about how do you, if you were to unitize a modular unit, and what we're talking about is the MEPs here, where if you can put the water heating system, the HVAC system, all in the mod, in the factory, then the amount of electrical MEP work that's being done on site dramatically drops. You still have it. You still have to do the final hookups. Those are hey, I got to get a wire, because the whole modular unit is pre-wired. Like you could literally run the modular unit in the factory. If you had a generator, you could just plug it in and the air conditioning would turn on, the lights would turn on.
Oh, we actually do.
And they actually do this. But you still got to connect it to the main the utility,
yeah.
the infrastructure. And so you've got, and these electricians are coming in with these crazy prices because they're losing out on wiring up the room and they're trying to recapture that. So Shanti's idea, which is, and this is a good one, this is one that we all need to try and work together towards, is like, how do you unitize as much of this as possible? Because MEPs are expensive and they're getting more expensive. If you don't know what's happening in the data center business, they are buying up electricians. Every electrician has got 2 jobs. One of them is their day job where they get paid to go out and do work. And then they've got another check coming in from a data center company that says, look, I'm going to just pay you on standby. And when I need you, you drop that job you're in and you come to my site. And they're all getting these $200, or $100 an hour, like just rates that they've never seen. And so we're losing our trades, especially our MEPs. Okay, so with that comment, did I miss anything, Shanti? And there's a really great report that you should download, and Shanti can give you that. It's online.
I will say from the plant standpoint, I mean.
Yeah, the question was, this is the one everybody wants to know, is like, when do I get my discount on how many mods or how many panels? Like everybody wants to know this question, and it's a difficult one to answer, but it is answerable, and Andy's now going to.
Well, I think everybody heard, or I hope most of you heard Von's, some of his answers this morning, but we're very similar in regard to, we have internal architects at Vantem. We have we have design ability. We can AOR a project if we need to. Not that we want to. We really like a design assist, but and I think they have developed something very similar to ours, which is a standard offering of product that is repeatable. And in that regard, you can, if you're buying from our catalog, you're already getting the advantage of a better pricing structure. As if it doesn't have to be designed, engineered again, that is pretty costly, even to run through our architectural division using outside structural engineers. All that has a cost associated with it. So I would say to you is find, I don't know where you're located, but find a manufacturer that has a catalog of repeatable product that will fit your needs, and that will get you the best price. Now, unless you're building projects in the 300 to 400 unit range, if it's not a standard offering and it's a specialized offering, you can get some advantage to cost cuts if it's a repeatable product in your design. And in that regard, use an architect or use the manufacturer's design team to help you design what is repeatable and will go through the production line in a cost-effective manner.
It just depends on the market you're going into. It's the simplest answer. So we've already told you that using manufacturable products, then you can go a lot deeper on that from a systems perspective and a MEP systems perspective. But it just depends on the market you're going into. So if you're going into a expensive market, a market where it is very expensive to build site-built construction, you can take about 50% of your cost and put that in a factory. So that factory cost is going to be relatively fixed, whether that product is going into San Francisco or if it's going into Stockton. Similar codes, very different cost profile, but the factory cost is relatively the same. So if you're going into a more expensive market, you're going to have a benefit. So it really comes down to where you're building. And then the next thing I would just take to this is people should look outside of just multifamily for examples. Now, multifamily, there are great examples. On a capital A affordable housing project, if I'm going to hold up a shining star, Seattle able to turnkey deliver a building on 2.5 levels of podium for $262,000 a key with prevailing wage. It has every potential requirement you could have. That was probably a 40,000-ish savings per door on that project by going modular. So that the process on that was architect didn't have modular experience. I told the developer, we won't touch this project unless you let Prefab Logic go redesign your project for you. Prefab Logic started with a manufacturable box, created the units, fed that back to the architect, and then that got built. But if you want to go to the next level, look at what Marriott has done. So the Studio Res product, they've created a 122-room hotel. We can routinely, site-built or modular, build that in California for less than $120,000 a key.
And on the East Coast, we're doing that for $99,000 a key.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they designed that product with modular manufacturers. I worked with them on a lot of that initial design, so did modular manufacturers, and they just listened to the entire industry and designed a product and said, developer, you don't get to change it. You want to run a Studio Res building? This is what it looks like.
Okay. Real short answer on that. If you don't have a lot of product, you need to order off a catalog. If you come in and say, it ain't going to work. You got to order off somebody's catalog.
Yeah.
Second thing, multi-year. If you aren't thinking like, hey, we're doing a 3-year program here, you ain't getting any discounts. Then all this other stuff factors into.
But I will say, look, and Ken, I know you and I have been doing this a long time, but I've had I can't tell you how many, I don't have enough fingers and toes to tell me how many developers have come to me and said, I'm going to give you 20 homes a month. And not one of them ever lived up to it. So it's always, and I am throwing darts, but that because it happens not 50% of the time, it happens 100% of the time.
Most of the time.
Plants can gear up and build what's needed. I mean, I've always, with customers in the past, they always had a fear that I couldn't build enough for them. And I was always waiting on them. I could build them faster than they could ever get them finished in the field. And that has happened to me not once, but hundreds of times. I could give you examples. So the industry itself has the capacity, I think, to build what's needed as long as we have a path to get there.
Yeah, and Vaughn gave us like some good ideas on how to think about
Exactly.
that path. And this starts with a steady diet of vegetables, not Twinkies, which is what we're all being fed in the factory business, in the construction business. And if we don't get more vegetables, we're just going to continue to like be diabetic on this whole thing. And the
So what he means by that is chasing a sugar rush. So you see a big project and everybody says, yes, we can go do that because
Yeah.
they see a big profit margin.
And
What
I
he means
s-
by that is actually building up the foundation to be able to produce at a capacity to deliver the demand that is now coming here.
And this
Exactly.
is a story that 5 years ago when I worked with Marriott to write the economic plan for how to do the studio res and resulted in that. Those are the type of real estate plays. The military is another one of these big real estate plays that are going to help the industry get on the treadmill of what it takes to be an industrialized, more modernized industry. Okay, so with that, we only have 5 more minutes left, 4 more minutes. I want to hit a couple risk questions. We didn't really get into the topic of risk. Risk is a lot more nuanced. And so I wanted to ask Justin and why am I blanking? Andy. Wow. That was
You had a sugar rush?
yeah. So I want to ask them to think about the biggest risk reduction that you get in this process from a GC perspective, from a factory perspective. And then I want you to answer, what's the new risk that you don't have in a conventional construction that you don't have to think about because you're doing industrialized? So both sides of the equation, I think, either one of you can start with either one.
And we have limited time, so I'll keep it brief. The biggest risk reduction, right, is you can go buy, factory can go buy all the material right away. So you've just gotten rid of supply chain risk if done properly. You've just gotten rid of a typical site-built project. You are looking at hundreds of just-in-time deliveries of very complex supply chain and logistics system. In a modular project, you've done well, you've gotten rid of that risk.
One throat to choke.
You have, well, and you have a factory and it's a bonded warehouse and you've just ordered every single window, appliance, countertop, cabinet, light fixture, plumbing fixture, and they all have to be there before you start the first box because the first box is going to be done in a couple of weeks. You don't have time to wait for windows, right? So done well, you have just eliminated the entire supply chain logistics risk as well as cost fluctuation of all of those materials. So that's one thing that you've just de-risked. The next thing, as it's been mentioned, is overall construction time. The longer you're on a site, the more things happen. The quote, nowhere outside of an active battlefield do men have to make more consequential decisions with less information and imperfect information on a changing parameter than a construction site, right? That is what a construction site is.
Battlefield.
And it's constantly dealing with, you have 20% of the information and you have to make a decision that's going to be a $100,000 decision constantly. That's what a superintendent's job is. So you've eliminated that by getting this built in a factory. So that's, I will just say, that is the best risk reduction if done well.
Andy, you get less time, and we still have to do the we have to do the new risk. Like,
No.
what's the thing we have to think about now?
I think, again, I'll just add on to what you said, time, theft. You didn't talk about theft, but, you know, you don't have materials walking off from an active job site as soon as you turn the lights off every day. It's prevalent in the industry.
We don't talk about theft in California.
But I think that, and I think that, like you said, the product being built in a plant, it's in a storage facility that is, I mean, we're building those boxes, we're protecting them really well. We're in our storage facilities at the plant, we have plenty of security, plenty of acreage, fenced. All of that risk is eliminated, and it's only delivered to site when it's needed. So Typically, the construction's going on in the plant while the site is being prepped and ready. And as the slabs go in, we deliver and start going vertical. So I think that is the biggest thing that
What's the new risk? 15 seconds each.
New
The
risk.
new risk that you have to think about in this new paradigm.
The 15 seconds of new risk is water. So you're now putting all of your finished
answer.
services into a building that doesn't have a finished roof on it,
Great answer.
most often. So water is the biggest risk.
You get one and then I'm done.
And then the second risk is the
No, you
factory.
only get one.
Well, I think you hit on both. Number one is water. I think that's the biggest concern that everybody has is thinking about modular construction, because I know that you've all heard the horror stories in the industry. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have let buildings get soaking wet, but they got fixed and they went on. But the idea is you don't want it to get wet because it is finished inside. So, we go to great lengths. We have a complete moisture intrusion protocol at Vantem that eliminates that. I can't tell you it's going to eliminate it 100%.
You don't have enough time to tell them about it, Andy.
But I'm not going to go through the whole protocol. I'm just telling you that it's been developed. I think most of the factories today have done a really good job at providing protocols that will limit or minimize the risk of water intrusion. And again, I think, from a bank's perspective, they have off-site inventory that they have to pay for in advance. I hear that routinely from the large lenders. You want how much? Well, guess what? I've got material procurement, I've got labor going on, I've got cost overhead, and nobody's waiting for that. So getting a bank comfortable with the product being stored off-site and advancing money for procurement of materials up front is something that we're trying to work with them to understand.
Great answer. New risk. Yes, the funding flow of an IC project is very different than a site-built conventional project. And with that, gentlemen, thank you, everybody. Hand over. By the way, these guys, and I hope more of you in the room, are ones that raised their hand when Vaughn was not asking a rhetorical question of how many of us are in this to solve this. I think this room is full of a lot more of those people. I want to see more hands next time. All right, Lex.